Hello everyone and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a few injury updates, a couple of updates on some contract extension talks with some teams like Montreal, Boston, and Seattle, as well as a couple of trade rumors surrounding the Arizona Coyotes and the Minnesota Wild, and a milestone to get to as Steven Stamkos finally hit 500 goals. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now usually I would start things off with some signings, but there haven't been any signings over the past few days, so we're not going to do any of that, but I do want to get to a milestone first, as Steven Stamkos in yesterday's game against the Vancouver Canucks was able to hit the 500 goal mark, which is absolutely brilliant. We were waiting for a couple of games for this to happen. Stamkos hit goal 499 3 games ago against the Vancouver Canucks, so he's obviously really scored well against Vancouver. He actually had a hat-trick last night, so he also scored goal number 501 and 502. So this is really good for Stamkos. He's had one heck of a career. There have been some times during his career where we thought that he may never play again. He did have a few seasons where he was really badly injured, but all in all, he's a really great goal scorer. He's the 47th player to hit the 500 goal mark, which is outstanding. And he's also the third active player to hit that goal total, with only Ovechkin and Crosby having hit it before him. So, good for him to do that. Also, he's the 23rd player to hit the 500 goal mark with just one team. So, really great for Stamkos to hit the 500 goal mark. I expect him to continue to do really well and score some more goals. He's done really well with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I could even see him hitting maybe 550, 600 goals before his career is over, depending on how long his career is and if he has any more injuries. But definitely good for Stamkos to hit his 500th goal, and I expect many more goals from Stamkos over the rest of his career. Next, we're going over to the injury update part of the video, and we'll get started with the Vegas Golden Knights, as the Knights have had both good and bad news on the injury front. They were able to get back William Carrier from his injury, but Mark Stone is going to be out for a little while due to another injury. Now for Carrier, he only missed one game. He was an unhealthy scratch. It wasn't really a big deal to lose him, and he was right back into game action. So getting Carrier back is huge. He's not the best Knights forward, but he's a really good bottom six piece. He's been with the Knights ever since their expansion draft in 2017. So he's played a lot with the Vegas Golden Knights, and he's really done well. Ever since Vegas took him in the expansion draft, he's been a really good bottom six forward, playing sometimes on the fourth or the third line, but he's definitely done well. He's not too much of a point producer, but he can put up points on occasions, and he's just done really, really well with Vegas. So getting him back is big. I know the Knights do have a little bit of lacking depth in the forward group with some injuries right now, so getting Carrier back is huge. As for Stone, this is a really, really bad injury. He suffered an upper body injury and is going to be out week to week, which is absolutely awful news. Stone is a huge piece of this Vegas Golden Knights offense. A really good top six piece and the team leader as their captain. So definitely think that losing him, not going to be good for the Knights. They have enough pieces, I think, for the time being to make do, even though they are a little bit lacking in the depth in some of these injuries right now, but not really going to be good. There is some concern that it may be related to his back injury from last year that kept him out for a little bit later in the season, so that's also not good. And right now he's week to week, so there's not really any significant timeline. He's just going to be out probably for the next at least 2-3 weeks. So getting Carrier back is huge, especially with the injury to Stone, and I think that if they can weather the storm until Stone gets back sometime later in the year, a really great top six piece for them is not going to be good. And hopefully they have enough pieces for them to recover and bounce back and still be a good team, as they're really still leading the Pacific Division. But Seattle and LA are really, really close to them, so Vegas needs wins, and they need them now, and losing their captain is not going to help that. Over in Edmonton, they had a few injury placements and activations as well, as Evander Kane was able to be activated off of a long-term injury reserve and was back in the game action for the Edmonton Oilers. However, the flip side of that is that Kyler Yamamoto has been placed in long-term injury reserve and is going to miss the foreseeable future. Now for Kane, we know that he had a horrible injury. He got his wrist cut with a skate blade. It looked really, really bad. He was first given like a 3 to 4 month timeline, and he's definitely done well ahead of that. He's only been out for like 2.5 months, so he's a bit ahead of schedule, and the addition of Kane is going to help this Oilers team greatly. The Oilers have done well enough. They're just above the 500 mark. So they're not doing overly well, but they're not doing half bad either. So getting Kane back is huge. He's a good driving force of that top six. When you have guys like Drysdale and McDavid scoring on a regular basis, You need guys like Kane to sort of fill out the depth scoring, and I think getting Kane back is going to be huge and should help them with that depth scoring. And putting him back in their top six is really going to help them. I know they've really missed Kane and his physical presence on that forward group, so getting Kane back is going to be a huge boost to that offense. And I think that the Oilers should still do really well. I know this will probably dampen some trade talks on trying to get a forward for now, and they'll probably try and focus on the defensive end, but getting Kane back is a huge win for the Oilers, as he showed last year and in the earlier parts of this year that he fits in really well with the Oilers and is a big part of that offense. Now, as for Yamamoto, he went down with an undisclosed injury and is going to be out for an unknown period of time. So that's not going to be good news for the Oilers. As much as the trade-off for Kane and Yamamoto is good, it's still not ideal. Yamamoto's a good top 9 forward. Plays majority in the top 6 with either Draisaitl or McDavid. And is one of the better depth scorers in the Oilers organization. So losing him is not going to be ideal. Given the fact he's out for an unknown period of time, it really does make it difficult about when he's going to be back. But he was placed on long-term injury reserve, which means he will probably miss at the very least around a month, maybe just before a month. So he's probably not going to be back until sometime between mid to late February would be my guess, at the very earliest. But definitely losing Yamamoto is not good. He's a really good depth scorer, a really good young piece of this Oilers. Getting Kane back is a huge boost to the Oilers offense. And getting him back into game action is going to be great, and it's just going to add another weapon to the Edmonton Oilers' offensive capabilities. Next with Detroit, as they have some good injury news on their front, as defenseman Robert Hägg and Philip Hronek were both back off of their injuries. Now for Hronek, he just didn't miss much time. He was injured a few days ago and is now healthy, so I don't even think he missed a game. Hronek's done really well this year. He's a good offensive defenseman. Really stepped up with Seider not doing overly great offensively this year, not to the extent he did last year. And Hronek's definitely done really, really well. I think as a top 4 defenseman, Hronek's done amazing with the Red Wings, and he should continue to be a good offensive defenseman. And as for Hägg, he's not the best of defensemen, but he's a pretty good one. Hägg has played in a few games in his first season with Detroit and done quite well. He had missed the past month due to his injury, so that's not ideal, but getting Hägg back is good. He's a good third pair defenseman, but with the Detroit Red Wings' depth right now on the blue line, I would say he's probably more of a 7th, 8th defenseman. And given the fact that they still have a pretty healthy decor, I would say that Hägg's probably going to get into some game action, but not a lot, so good to get that depth up for the Red Wings. You know, they've dealt with a ton of injuries this year, so getting Hägg back is huge. And I expect Hronek to get right back into game action and continue to play at a high level. And Hägg, if there are more injuries or if there's a player or two not playing too well, he should be able to get some time on the third pair. Maybe not a lot of time, but he should be able to get some time. So good for Hägg and Hronek to get back. And the Red Wings are still falling out of a playoff spot right now, so getting some more healthy bodies could help them in their push for a playoff spot. Next is the Kings. Is Carl Grundstrom and Gabriel Vilardi, both gone down with injuries and will miss some time due to them. Now for Vilardi, he's had a really great season this year, having a breakout season. He was a first-round pick in 2017 and had some injuries that slowed down his development, as well as not really getting much of an opportunity last year. But he's done amazing this year, and he's really fitting well in the top 9 for the LA Kings. But he is going to miss the next little while. He is currently day-to-day right now with an undisclosed injury, so it shouldn't be too long. He is day-to-day, so it's not overly concerning right now, I think, for Vilardi. But it could end up being a little bit longer. I hope to say maybe a week or two, and then Vilardi's back. But it's possible it's a little bit later, so hopefully Vilardi can get back soon. As for Carl Grundstrom, he also has an undisclosed injury, but he's going to be out for 3 weeks at the very least due to the undisclosed injury. So Grundstrom's a really good bottom 6 forward. I think he might be one of the more underrated bottom 6 forwards in the NHL. He's a really, really good bottom 6 forward. I still think he could even be like a third line forward in time. Grundstrom's done pretty well, and I think that he's a regular in the NHL roster, so losing him for at least the next 3 weeks is not going to be good. He's going to be out until probably middle of February, maybe later February. So not overly great for the LA Kings to lose 2 key young guys that are regulars in their roster. I know they also have a couple of other guys like a Kaliev out right now, so their forward group's a bit banged up right now, and they're going to have to use their strong depth in the forward group to overcome this tough time with their injuries. And last, with the Montreal Canadiens, they had an injury update, and there's going to be several guys out for a significant period of time in Montreal. Now, first, I'd like to get to the good news for the Montreal Canadiens, as Mike Matheson was able to be activated off injury reserve and gone to the Canadiens' most recent game. Matheson's a really good top four defenseman. He's been in and out of the lineup this year due to injuries. He hasn't really had a long stretch of being able to play good hockey due to his injuries. So getting Matheson back is huge. This Canadiens blue line is very, very young with guys like Harris, Xhekaj, and Goulet. So adding a guy like Matheson, who's a more veteran-y type player, is going to be great for the Canadiens. And I expect their defense to do well with Matheson now and there. But we'll start with the injuries and goaltending in Jake Allen, as he's missed the last little bit, and he's going to miss the next at least week with upper body injury. Now, Allen's missed a few games. The Canadiens have ran with Montembeault and Primeau for the last little while, and they've done all right. They're still a little bit away from the playoffs and still slipping, but they're doing okay as best as they can. Allen being out is not ideal. He's a really good starting goaltender, and hopefully he can get back soon. Of the injuries that were announced, he's probably the one that's going to be back the soonest, so hopefully Allen isn't out for too long, and he can get back into game action soon. There were 4 more injury updates on the forward group for the Montreal Canadiens. We'll start with Armia and Chychrun, as both are going to miss at the very least 3 weeks with upper body injuries. Now, both of these guys have been mentioned in trade rumors. Chychrun's a pending unrestricted free agent. Armia is signed for the next couple of seasons, and both don't seem to have a long-term future with the Canadiens, so missing time is not going to be overly good. They're both going to be out until probably mid to late February, so not overly ideal for the Canadiens, especially when they have to call up some of their younger guys from their AHL affiliate, but they're not the best of forwards. They're both okay top 9 forwards, so losing them is not going to really hurt them that much, but hopefully those two can get back into game action. I know Chychrun's a possible trade candidate for a trade line, and Armia could be dealt, if not right now, then the off season as well. So hopefully those two guys can recover from their injuries and get back soon. As for Jake Evans, he's going to miss approximately the next 10 weeks due to a knee injury, and that's not great news. He's going to miss the next 2.5 months, which is going to put him right around the start of April, so it doesn't give him much time to play this year anymore. He's probably going to maybe get into a few games late in the season, but not very many games, and that's really, really bad news for Evans. He's a good third-line center, and he's done well over the past few years, showing that he's a really good third-line center. So losing him for the next 2.5 months is not going to be good. As for Juraj Slavkovsky, the Canadiens' first overall pick from this past draft, and one of the good young rookies on the Montreal Canadiens, has also sustained a knee injury, and he's going to be out for about 3 months. So not overly ideal for Slavkovsky. It's possible, well, I'm not going to say it's for certain, it's possible that if Slavkovsky gets out at around the 3.5 month mark, he could miss the rest of the NHL season. So not ideal for the Canadiens. He's a good young prospect, so you don't want him to lose any time getting into game action. So losing Slavkovsky for possibly the season is probably the worst of the injuries that were announced. And hopefully he can get back, maybe get into a few games later on to the season. But really, bad news all around for the Canadiens, losing Allen for the next week, Chychrun Armia for the next 3 weeks, Evans for about 2.5 months, and Slavkovsky for 3 months. Hopefully the Canadiens can get some bodies back soon. I know there's a lot of injuries with the Canadiens right now. That was probably the main reason why they finished dead last in the NHL last year. So injuries continue to bite the Canadiens, and hopefully they can overcome these injuries and become a more healthier team in the near future. Now that's all the injury updates I want to talk about today. Before we get to trade rumors, we do have a small trade to announce. As the Detroit Red Wings and San Jose Sharks swap depth players, as the Red Wings acquired Jasper Weatherby from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for Kyle Kraskulo. Now, for both of these players, they both got into game action last year at the NHL level and at the AHL level, but have only played in the AHL this year. For Weatherby, he actually got into a good chunk of games with the Sharks. He was able to put up 5 goals and 11 points in 50 games last year as a bomb 6 forward with the Sharks. And when he didn't get into game action at the NHL level, he played really well in the AHL level, putting up 5 goals and 15 points in 25 games. So Weatherby did really, really well last year. Looked like he could have a potential of being a bomb 6 forward at the NHL level. But then the Sharks went out, sort of switched up their bomb 6, got a few more players, and Weatherby went down the depth charts. So far this year, he's gotten to 39 AHL games, putting up 3 goals and 6 points. So he's definitely not been as productive as he was last year at the AHL level, and he hasn't gotten NHL games this year, so not good for Weatherby, but hopefully a fresh change of scenery can get his production back to where it was last year. As for Chris Kulo, he had 2 assists in 6 NHL games last year, and he only got into a tiny bit of NHL action, but he showed that he could be a okay depth call-up as a fourth-line forward. But he really did well in the AHL, putting up 15 goals and 39 points in 57 games, which is absolutely great for Chris Kulo in the AHL. But this year, with the Red Wings' added depth that they got in the offseason, he's been definitely thrown down the depth charts, hasn't been called up this year at this point. Only put up 5 goals and 10 points in 28 games, which isn't as good as he did last year as well. So the fact that Weatherby and Chris Kulo had really good seasons last year, and they just haven't been able to find the same sort of confidence this year, just not overly great for either of the players. So swap of the 2 forwards is pretty good for the Red Wings and the Sharks. I think Weatherby has the more NHL future potential. I think that if the Red Wings were maybe to sell off a few pending unrestricted free agents, Weatherby could be a really, really good bomb 6 forward. I think if he was able to regain his confidence, show how well he did last year in Detroit, I think he could do well. As for Chris Kulo, he's probably just a depth addition. I know the Sharks are sellers, so they could move a guy like a Bonino or a Nieto on the forward group. And if they are, the depth might be a bit lacking on the forward group. So maybe getting a guy like Chris Kulo will help them just in case they move on for some of the players. So good to finally see a trade. It's not a really significant one. Hopefully this is a sign of more trades to come. But a trade nonetheless, just a depth move for each team. Weatherby's going to go to Detroit. Chris Kulo is going to go to San Jose. And both hope to play it just as well as they did last year in their new organizations. Now let's get over to the trade rumor part of the video. Now we'll start with some of the extension talks that have been happening around the NHL. Start with Pastrnak. There's been some talk over the past couple of weeks that David Pastrnak and the Boston Bruins have been working towards the extension, and it's been inching closer. Now, it's not going to be a done deal right now, and there's still a lot of work to do, but the fact that the Pastrnak and the Bruins are inching closer to an extension is huge. I know Pasternak's a really key piece of this Bruins team, having a career season this year, as he's had 33 goals and 59 points in 42 games. Last year, he had 40 goals and 77 points in 72 games, so he's almost at the 40 goal point, and he's played 30 less games. So Pasternak's been an absolute beast on the ice, and getting him locked up is huge. There's a lot of talk that maybe the extension for Pastrnak could be somewhere in the double-digit mark. So I would not be surprised if that was the case. And Pasternak's really shown his ability to be a really good dominant forward. So hopefully Pastrnak and the Bruins can get that done. It does sound like things are working towards a extension. Over with the Montreal Canadiens and Cole Caufield, there was some talk in the most recent insider trading that the Canadiens and Caufield started extension talks a month ago and could also be nearing an extension. Maybe not imminent, but the Canadiens are hopeful to get it done in the near future. Caufield's been a really good young forward for the Canadiens, putting up some really great goal totals, having 26 goals and 36 points in 45 games, which is just a tad bit less than his 23 goals and 43 points in 67 games from last year. But on the flip side, he has played a lot less games than last year at this point, so he's looking really, really good. He's already got more goals than he did last year. He looks like he could be a legit 40-goal scorer in the NHL for now and in the future. So getting him locked up would be pretty good for the Canadiens. Both Caufield and Suzuki seem to be really key parts of this Canadiens offense going forward and into the future. So hopefully the Canadiens and Caufield can work out an extension in the near future, and Caufield can continue to be a Canadian for the foreseeable future. As for Kuzmenko in Vancouver, as we talked about before, there were some rumblings about a possible extension talks with the Canucks, and it does sound like Kuzmenko and the Canucks are talking about an extension. Now, it does sound like Kuzmenko wants some sort of a $6 to $7 million AAV on his next contract. I still think if the Canucks were to sign him to $6 or $7 million is not ideal. They've already given a bad contract to Miller that hasn't aged well, and he hasn't even gotten into the first part of it. So hopefully, if they do end up trying to sign Kuzmenko, they try and sign him for maybe between $5 and $6 million instead of trying to sign him for around $7 million. I think if they were to sign him for like maybe $5.5 million for the next 3 years, maybe that's a little bit better. But I think if Kuzmenko were to go to the open market, there would be a team or two who would give him $7 million. So hopefully the Canucks can continue to work out a contract extension with Kuzmenko. He's a really big piece of that forward group. Done really well with Pettersson and Mikheyev. So hopefully they come to terms with an extension that isn't too much money for the Canucks. And if there was to be an extension for the Kuzmenko in Vancouver, I would have to say that maybe a guy like a Brock Besser or a Connor Garland winds up being moved, to create the cap space that they need. But definitely something to keep our eye on as Kuzmenko and Vancouver continue to try and work on a contract extension. If a contract extension isn't worked out by late February, early March, then it's quite possible that Kuzmenko winds up being dealt before the trade deadline. So definitely a situation to keep our eye on. And then with the Seattle Kraken and Vince Dunn, Dunn's had an absolutely phenomenal season, putting up 9 goals and 33 points in 44 games. And he's on his way to having a new career high. He tied his career high last year in his first year with Seattle, putting up 35 points. And he's well on pace to pass his career high this year. But he doesn't seem to be wanting to talk about an extension until after the offseason. Dunn's a pending restricted free agent who's going to be an unrestricted free agent in like a year or two. So getting a long-term extension with Dunn would be good. I could see Dunn probably signing for somewhere between $5.5 and $7 million with the Kraken for like the next 4 to 6 years. That would just be my guess. But definitely think that Dunn could easily get a long-term deal in the offseason with the Seattle Kraken. He's done very well since they drafted him in the expansion draft. But there's not going to be very much contract talk between him and the Kraken until the end of the season. So definitely think that these 4 extension talks are going to be interesting and important to keep our eyes on. Will Kuzmenko be signed before the deadline? Does Pastrnak re-up with the Bruins before the deadline? Can Caufield get an extension done soon? And what will Dunn sign for? Definitely interesting. Now with the other trade rumor pieces. First with Dumba, there is some speculation that Minnesota could end up trading Dumba, and Ottawa has legit interest in trying to acquire Dumba. The Wild are definitely looking to try and improve this team, and they are considering moving Dumba. I don't think it's a given that Dumba's moved, and they've said so themselves. But there has been some speculation that if Dumba were to be moved, and they were able to bring in another defenseman who can slot into another top 4 role, at the very least for this playoff run, they'll be willing to move Dumba. And I think that's a really good possibility. Not exactly sure if Dumba would end up being moved before the trade deadline, but it's definitely a possibility. Dumba's done really well with Minnesota, only put up 12 points in 43 games this year, which is a really, really bad point total, but he's still a really good offensive defenseman. I think in the right scenario, he can still be the good 30, 40, maybe even 50-point defenseman he has been in the past. So hopefully Dumba can do really well, and maybe the Wild end up trading him. There's definitely some talk that the Ottawa Senators have some legitimate interest in trying to acquire Dumba. We know that the Sens have looked for defensemen since the offseason, so I don't think it's too surprising that the Sens have some interest in Dumba. But definitely be interesting to see if they were able to acquire Dumba. I think if the Wild were to move Dumba, they could probably get like a second-round pick and a good prospect for him. And they could use that second-round pick and prospect to maybe go out and to acquire another good top 4, maybe top 6 defenseman. So definitely something to keep our eye on. Do you think Dumba winds up being moved? And if so, will he be moved to Ottawa, or is there another team who you think would be a good fit for Dumba? And lastly, with Jacob Chychrun in the Arizona Coyotes, we know we've talked about him for a while, but there have been some recent speculations that the Kings could be the front runner to land Chychrun. It sounds like the Kings have had on and off discussions with Chychrun over the past year and a half, since the Yotes said that they would be willing to trade him. And Chychrun's done fantastic this year. He's blown last year's point total out of the water, and he's done absolutely phenomenal. He started this year injured, which is why some of the trade speculation was a little bit slow to get going. But after he's come back, he's looked fantastic. He has 5 goals and 23 points in 28 games. He has played a whole bunch less than his 47 games played last year, and already has 2 more points than last year's point total. So he looks absolutely great. He looks like a good top 4 defenseman that teams will be wanting to acquire. And on top of that, he also has a reasonable cap hit of $4.6 million for the rest of this year plus 2 more seasons. So a team acquiring him is going to get a really, really good offensive defenseman in Chychrun. And for the Kings, this actually fills a lot of the boxes. They need another good defenseman and someone who can play left side, which is what Chychrun can do. And of the teams, as we've mentioned, the Kings, Blue Jackets, Sabres, Senators, the Kings actually have probably the best chance of meeting the Arizona Coyotes asking price. I mean, they're in a playoffs right now, so I don't think maybe moving their first-round pick this year would be something they're not willing to do. And while Arizona has said that they really wanted another first-round pick or a comparable top-end prospect, the Kings have an absolute plethora of good young players right now, including centers. I mean, they could maybe move like a guy like Akil Thomas, Alex Turcotte, Quentin Byfield, Samuel Fagemo. There's a few options out there for the Kings to possibly move a good young center. Tyler Madden is another one, so definitely some options out there for LA. I think if there was a team to meet the Arizona Coyotes' asking price of a first round pick, another first round pick, or a high elite level prospect and a good prospect, I would think that it would probably be the LA Kings. And given the fact that it seems like they're the front runners right now, it's quite possible that they are the likely landing spots for Jakob Chychrun before the trade deadline. But definitely going to be interesting to see, does Chychrun go to LA? And if so, what sort of trade package do you think LA could move for Jakob Chychrun? That's all I'm going to talk about today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I will have a link to in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.